Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. This is Belle Bergner with the North American Invasive Species Management Association, and we're going to get started in a few minutes. We're about 4 minutes until start time for the webinar today. So thanks for joining, and sit tight. We'll get started in a few minutes. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning. We're going to get started in about 15-20 seconds. I'm going to let a few more people join us. So thanks for coming, and we'll be starting in just a moment. All right, well, welcome everyone. I hope you can hear me. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. It's a few seconds after 1 o'clock. And I'm just communicating with my co-organizers here. I am Belle Bergner. I'm the Executive Director of the North American Invasive Species Management Association. We're so glad you're here with us today, taking time out of your busy schedules to participate in this webinar, our NAISMA's first webinar of our new series in 2019. So thank you again for being here. As you can see there on our title slide, we are the North American Invasive Species Management Association. Our mission is to support, promote, and empower invasive species prevention and management in North America. I'm going to just give you a little bit of just a couple of tips here during the webinar for anyone who's new to this platform. You can post questions. You should see a little box, sort of dialog box there, and there's a little tab that says questions. If you would like to post a question, you are welcome to do so right there on that tab. And down below, you can see a chat box. You are welcome to post any comments there. We want to ask if you can post questions on that question tab, just so we can keep track of which questions have been asked, and I can keep track of which ones I've answered. So with that, I'm going to get started. All right, so today I'm going to be talking about NAISMA's weed-free forage and gravel certification program, supporting multi-jurisdictional cooperation. So a little overview and deliverables. At the end of this webinar, you will understand what is the weed-free forage and gravel program, participation requirements of the program, how the weed-free forage and gravel pit program works, a bit of the nuts and bolts of how things work and the workflow of getting into our program, and who can be a certified weed-free forage or gravel inspector, and when you can take the training to be a certified inspector. So a little bit about who we are in case anyone is new to the organization. Our mission is, as I said before, to support, promote, and empower invasive species prevention and management in North America. Our vision is that North America's lands and waters are protected from invasive species. The organization is about 26 years old. In 2012, the name changed from the North American Weed Management Association to Invasive Species, North American Invasive Species Management Association, so that we could include all taxa in our efforts to prevent the spread of invasive species, not just on land, but in water. Okay, and just a little bit about what we do. We promote international standards to promote cooperation across borders. We support the regulation and certification of weed-free forage, mulch, and gravel producers, which is what I'm talking about today. We have an outreach and awareness campaign, Play, Clean, Go, that we adopted from the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources that founded the campaign. And we are in the process of taking over national campaign management of that. We offer professional development services. We have online trainings, and we have a conference annually. This coming year will be in Saratoga Springs, New York, in late September and early October. Okay, so let's get to the meat of the webinar. So the weed-free forage and gravel program is a cooperative program that sets standards for inspection and certification of forage, mulch, and gravel producers. It provides a unified system of inspection and training that is standardized across jurisdictional boundaries. Here's a lovely photo from our past president, Mark Deluge, out in Wyoming. This is his lovely place of work. Here's a forage field that is, looks like it's about to be baled up. So the challenge that we're dealing with is it's a very specific pathway. Forage and gravel can be pathways of spread for invasive species. Federal lands and increasing areas of state lands require the use of weed-free forage and gravel. The item that we're trying to manage, this pathway, it's a defined pathway, and yet it's complicated in the sense that there's always the potential for the spread of and influx of invasive species. So part of the challenge is figuring out a process for a standard way of inspecting and certifying producers. But and to counter that challenge, the opportunity is that we have lots of skilled local, county, and state inspectors who have the tools, they have the skills to be able to identify invasive species. And the fact that many states and counties have weed laws or other regulations kind of provides that backbone that supports our program of certifying weed-free forage and gravel. So our solution that started as a grassroots process many years ago, it started through some Western states kind of banding together and wanting to cooperate and make sure everyone is basically following the same standards and protocols, is that we have this standard solution. It's a set of very specific standards, and by getting multiple states and counties and other regional entities to participate in the program, we have the assurance that there is cross-jurisdictional agreement and cooperation to uphold the standards. NAISMA, as the independent organization, coordinates the memorandums of understanding. We work with the local states, counties, and entities that sign the MOUs, and we maintain certification records of those MOUs and of the inspectors who take our trainings. So a quick sort of workflow of how the program works. As I mentioned, and I'll talk about each of these steps in the workflow as we go through the webinar. So first, there is a memorandum of understanding that the local agency signs, and I'll show you where to find that MOU in a little bit. We have specific weed-free forage and gravel certification standards, and I'll talk about how agencies can choose whether to participate in one or both of those standards, forage and or gravel. The inspectors in those agencies take our training either online or in person. And then I'll talk about how we have a specific set of standards for the certificate that has to accompany any inspection that occurs on forage or gravel pits. And we have an expectation of a transit certificate minimum standards that must go along any certified weed-free forage or gravel. So who is involved? Again, usually it is a state agency, typically the Department of Agriculture of a state, but sometimes departments of agriculture defer to crop improvement associations or related associations that they contract out this kind of work to. And sometimes states prefer that counties take the lead and regulatory burden of holding the MOU. For example, California, the California Department of Agriculture does not sign MOUs with us, but they allow individual counties to sign MOUs with us. And similarly, I think it's West Virginia, we have a similar situation in Pennsylvania. So then the inspectors of the agency, whether it's the Department of Agriculture or Crop Improvement Association, takes our training, and I'll go through the steps involved in that. And then again, so NAISMA staff, we coordinate the MOU, maintain the records and certifications. And I want to make sure I point out that this program is absolutely dependent on an incredible group of volunteers. Our volunteer committee of general members of NAISMA, board members, and MOU holders who participate on this committee and meet regularly to make sure that the standards sort of meet their local needs and address any issues that come up along the way. And any changes to the program standards, it goes through a pretty rigorous process where the committee reviews any suggested changes, and those changes are recommended to the NAISMA Board of Directors, and it must be approved by the NAISMA general membership at our annual meeting. So here's just a fun picture of a field trip that happened at our recent conference in Rochester, Minnesota. This is a forage field. I believe the gentleman in the red jacket there is the producer of that field that was prepared for inspection. So one of the things we offer every year is a tour of something that is useful to our members and our audience. And I know that this was a very well-received opportunity for folks to learn hands-on how an inspection works. We might try to look for other opportunities in the future to do that in more places. Here's the final product that we're all looking to figure out how to ensure is weed-free. This is another picture from our former board president, Mark Deluge, out in Wyoming. And so let's get into the nuts and bolts of what the components of the program look like. So this is what the MOU looks like. This is something that you download from our website. It's a PDF that you can fill in. It's the agency that fills this in and sends it to us. Here you can see, let's see if my cursor works. I don't know if you can see my arrow, but on the top of that MOU, there's the option to click whether the agency is participating in weed-free forage or weed-free gravel or both. So just so that everyone understands, you don't have to, the agency doesn't have to take the responsibility for all three if they're not comfortable or if their interest at this time is just on one or the other. So contact information is filled here in the form, and then, lost my clicker now, here we go. There are specific standards that the MOU states the MOU holder agrees to uphold. However, as I'll talk about in a little bit, while there is this limit, there's a minimum standard. There is opportunity for specific states to add their own additional standards. But the basic expectation is that entities who sign the MOU uphold and agree to the minimum standards. One of which is this Appendix A, the prohibited weed list, which is, it's a list that has been put together over years based on the states who participate in the program. The list is not the entire federal noxious weed list. So if you are not a participating state right now, but you want to be, and you look at our list and you think that there are additional species that should be on that list, you can either petition to add those species through the committee process that I discussed before, or you can add those to your state's list for your inspectors. So again, so here are the minimum standards. This is a document also that you can download from our website. These were updated this most recent year with the addition of 2 new species. And I'm gonna just kind of keep going on here and move on to the certification training. So once the MOU holder signs the agreement, we know, usually the agency tells us who is going to take the training. We get the list of inspectors. Either folks can do the training again, as I said, at the conference, or sign up online. Actually, I'm jumping a little bit here, but going back to the standards, there are several appendixes that you can read if you want to go to the website and download this. But I'm going to show you what those look like. In Appendix B, it talks about the inspection certificate standards. There are 13 specific areas in the document that need to be filled out. What we provide is a template that your state can modify as you need, as long as those minimum fields are in your certificate document. In Appendix C, there is a transit certificate minimum standards, and I'll show you that in a little bit as well. And that also has to accompany the certified forage always. So here's a sample of the weed-free forage certificate. These are the minimum standard requirements again. And again, you, the MOU holder is welcome to customize this for your local needs. You can add any specific local regulatory language that you need to. Here's a lovely photo from our MOU participating state of Idaho. This is from Dan Safford. This is one of his producers certifying one of his fields out in Idaho. Just nice to throw in some images of what we're talking about here. Appendix D, just to keep going through what's in the standards, in Appendix D, it specifies that there's a very specific way that the forage needs to be marked, and I'm going to talk about the twine that we require. We require the use of very specific twine to designate the weed-free forage. We coordinate that, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And there's a tag that also needs to accompany the certified forage that designates it as weed-free forage. And then I'll talk about Appendix E, the minimum field inspection requirements. This is just a picture of our order form that we send out every year. Marcia Watland coordinates this, the purchase of the certified twine. Marcia Watland is our weed-free forage and gravel coordinator, without whom none of this would be possible. And I hope if Marcia is able to answer questions, I'm hoping she'll be here to answer some questions at the end. And I'm now going to kind of add, I'm going to move on a little bit into the gravel certification. So most of what I've talked about applies to both forage and gravel, but there are some specific issues that pertain to gravel that I'll talk about here. Again, there is a specific gravel inspection form we require the use of, but again, this can be customized for your local needs as long as those minimum fields are present on your document. And this is an example of Marcia's gravel certificate of inspection form that she uses in Becker County, Minnesota. You can see at the bottom there under requirements, you are welcome as the local entity to add any local requirements that you need to add, as long as those minimum requirements that we require are on your certificate. Here's excuse me, a picture from one of the fields that Marcia has been involved in certifying. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but when you take the gravel certification, the gravel training, that training will go into more detail about how to do the inspection and our expectations for upholding the minimum standards. Real briefly, we expect that the entire border is inspected, all buildings and equipment is inspected, all storage areas, and all work areas. Even surrounding areas may need to be inspected, especially if there's pasture or other areas that could be potential sources of invasive species. And we expect that material is not moved from the site until there is a completed and signed inspection. These are also pictures from Marcia showing where she went over and inspected a local field in her area. So she met with the producer in August. She did a first inspection. We do only require one inspection per year. However, states or provinces may require more than one inspection. As long as you're following our protocol, a minimum of one is required. This shows in September, Marcia went back and did a second inspection. And my cursor is not working here. There we go. An example of a new gravel or borrow pit inspection here, where roads and parking areas need to be inspected and determined to be free of prohibited weeds. And then another picture of where all equipment and working areas need to be inspected. All piles, equipment areas, work areas, borders, and roadways are also required to be inspected. And at the end of the day, we've got certified forage or gravel that's ready to transport. And just final nuts and bolts about the program, we do require minimal fees to support the program administration and improvements. Each MOU holder is expected to pay an $100 annual fee to participate, and each inspector is required to pay a $30 certification fee to take the exam or to take the training, which includes quizzes, to certify that they've fulfilled the minimum requirements of the training. But that certification is good for 3 years. So once you pay that $30 and take the training, that is good for 3 years. We send a certificate out to inspectors once the training is completed. And if you choose to do the training at the conference, there's actually no additional fee. So if you pay to attend the annual meeting and do the in-person conference training at the conference, there is no additional fee. So that $30 is basically absorbed into the cost of the conference registration. Participating states and provinces. We have 30 participating states and provinces at the moment, hoping that there are some of you from states or provinces not listed here who are interested in joining us. Our goal, our vision is that every single state is participating in this program. And as we add new states, the benefit is that we learn about what species are problematic, where new states are working, and there's the opportunity to add new species to our prohibited weed list, so that we strengthen and improve our ability to prevent new invasive species from moving across borders. So again, if you are interested in becoming a certified inspector, if your state or province is not a current partner, contact the relevant agency where you are, either Department of Agriculture, Crop Improvement Association. And if you're not sure, give us a call. I'll give you our contact information in a moment. We'll help you figure out who to reach out to. We'll help your agency fill out the MOU. And then we will find out what the preferred training method is, whether online or in person, make sure everyone is involved in the training. And in summary, before I move on to questions, just want to summarize that we're really proud, NAISMA is very proud of the fact that this is the only international standards program for these specific pathways of potential spread of invasive species. It very much heavily relies on cooperation and agreement of multiple geographic areas to uphold the standards. There is definitely a level of trust and cooperation that is really wonderful. And I think it's really the reason why the program has been successful. So we hope you will join us if you are not a participating state or province. Here is our contact information. If you're not a current partner and are interested in learning more, there's my information on the top and Marcia's is on the bottom. Definitely reach out to either of us. We'd love to help you get involved and answer any questions. And if you choose to take the training, we'll be in Saratoga Springs, New York, this coming October. It'll be a great time. We'll have at least a session on up-and-coming techniques and technologies and issues surrounding certifying weed-free forage and gravel, in addition to the actual training. So thank you again for being here today and joining us. And I'm going to move over and take a look at the questions that have come up. Let's see if I can open up my box here. So, okay. In Hawaii, we are dealing with a lot of movement of little fire ants, disease-bearing slugs, and snails, and pathogens in gravel forage and/or mulch. Are pests and pathogens included, or might they ever be included? I believe so. Do I hear, is Marcia on the line? Okay, perhaps not.
Okay.
Is that, Marcia, are you on the line there?
I'm here, but I don't think you can hear me.
Oh, yes, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yes, I am. Okay. So as far as response to the Hawaii issue with the mulch, we are working on that aspect at our committee right now, the weed-free forage and gravel. And we just have been broaching the topic as of our conference in October. And we're looking at this as a several-year process. At our next committee meeting, that's one of the things we're going to talk about, is maybe heat treatment that might work with mulch and movement. But we have a lot of work to do before that we could create a program for that, like we do with the weed-free forage and gravel. But we are starting to look at it now. Hopefully that helps.
That's great. Thank you, Marcia. Another follow-up question from Springer K in Hawaii is, have states generally used legislation to grant authority to counties? And has it been within existing authority of most state agencies? I believe the answer is yes, sometimes, but not always. I do think some states require a statute to be passed to grant authority. But Marcia, correct me if I'm wrong here.
Okay, as far as granting authority, dealing with the different states, and I'm not as familiar with the provinces, your state will have a noxious weed statute. Minnesota Department of Agriculture is not Minnesota, but the Department of Agriculture is normally the legal entity. And as I've worked with different states around US, there are weed inspectors, county ag inspectors. They also have the authority to do that. So if the state, the Department of Agriculture, they will have to bring it to their state legislative to get it approved. What we have been working with is there are a few weed or county ag inspector associations that carry the legal authority for enforcing the noxious weed law, and so they can go ahead and get set up on this program and work with the training and keeping track of the program. But it has to be a legal entity that can enforce the noxious weed law for their state, their county, or their province.
Thank you, Marcia.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry.
I said it's a lot. It's a lot of information.
Yeah, but that's super helpful. I mean, I think I wonder if Springer, if you're wondering if legislation is needed to grant authority to local counties. I mean, I think it's a state by state issue. So let's maybe talk afterwards, and we can help figure out whether your counties do have authority or need authority, or if it's your state agency that will let you move forward. Ken Donnelly says, are there requirements for people to use weed-free forage and gravel? Wondering about the market for the products. Great question. So what I understand, and Marcia can correct me again, is I think there are requirements on federal lands in the U.S. For example, on Forest Service and Park Service and BLM lands. Weed-free forage is required, and gravel is required. Weed-free gravel is required on new construction or road maintenance work. So there are markets for the product, and that is something that we're trying to figure out, is how to support that market. I think part of the challenge has been enforcing the requirements. That's something that I know a lot of these federal agencies are struggling to have the staff to do the enforcement. but there are requirements. And so it's also not just in federal lands, but also on increasing numbers of state lands, and I believe, local, depending on where you are. So it's sort of, it depends where you live. And but I think there is a growing number of areas that are requiring. Marcia, do you want to add to that?
No, I think you did an excellent job there, Belle. So great.
Okay. Okay. All right, moving down. Another question from Springer in Hawaii. Have states seen utility even for items that rarely move across state lines? I don't know that if I can answer that, but I do know, we know that a lot of places, so for example, I get calls from people looking for sources of weed-free forage, and they're having to look at states very far away from where they are to find weed-free gravel. So I'm not sure if you're referring to items other than weed-free forage or gravel, but I know that, the things that we're talking about are products that are moved across state lines. Question, why are there not more Canadian provinces involved in NAISMA? Why is Alberta the only province? I wonder if Kelly Cooley is on the line, and he could answer. Well, we've been working with them. I think it's, it's different. It's a different process up there. I know, some provinces have their own standards, and so they may not be participating in NAISMA standards, but they have their own provincial standards. And so we are working to try to incorporate and collaborate more with more Canadian provinces. So the answer is we are trying to get more. And I don't know why Alberta is the only one involved. It could be, we do have, NAISMA has a lot of members from Alberta, and it could just be the particular group of people that we have in our membership and on our board who have been able to help us get Alberta involved. Okay, next question. Tony Smith asks, can inspectors be trained by inspectors in MOU states, or is the only valid training that provided through NAISMA's online training? Great question. Yes, inspectors must be trained through NAISMA's training in order to be a part of our program. If you are using our standards, if your state agency has signed an MOU with us, the training needs to be done through us, either the online training or in person. Now, I will say we have worked with some states who have their own in-state training, but those individuals who are doing those trainings, they are using NAISMA's training. They have, they have the MOU with us. We're working together to make sure they're using the same training. But we do have a few states who prefer to do the training in state by their own trained personnel. So I hope that answers that question. Will we be able to view this webinar afterwards? This webinar will not be available to the public. However, it will be available to NAISMA's members. If you are not a member, you can navigate to our membership page and sign up. We have a special section for NAISMA members that has resources. And so, yes, the webinar will be available for members. Sue Burks asks, given that many infestations take multiple years to control, what allowances are built into the system to acknowledge active treatment programs? Is certification limited, restricted, and if so, for how long? If yes, how is control eradication defined or confirmed? I'm going to need Marcia's help to answer this question, which is a great, wonderful question. The answer is the inspector works with the producer to come back to a given field or gravel pit to re-examine, to re-inspect, knowing that, as you said, infestations can take years But the certification has to be done every year. So once a field or gravel pit is certified, it's only valid for 1 year. So the inspector is required to go back the following year in order for that producer to sell again as certified weed-free forage. Marcia, do you want to add to that?
Okay, yes, I will. I'll start out with the weed-free gravel, which is more of my background area. And when we're dealing with some aggressive noxious weeds, there are practices you use in the gravel pit to prevent the movement, and it will reduce the seed bed. When we do the minimum standards, we're making sure the vegetative part and the seeds aren't passed on. But with the gravel area, if there's an infestation, maybe everybody's familiar with spotted knapweed, you have the gravel pit scrape it back, and all area has to be treated with a herbicide for that pit specifically. And so that's how we're reducing it. As you know, there are some very aggressive weeds out there. And so we want the bare ground where the gravel is mined from. We also want where equipment goes and roadways to be clean. And those are fairly effective and can be taken care of right away for that timing. Now, when it comes to weed-free forage, I generally we'll send people to Julie Kraft for that. She has worked with this program basically from the beginning. And there is a strict process there. There's a 10-day period that the hay may or straw may be harvested. So yes, we do have programs in place for minimum standards that you know it's going to be consistent. And then the states or the province or counties adds on additional things that they require for their state. Okay, does that help with that?
So Sue had a follow-up question there. She asked, scrape it back how far or deep? And storage is an issue in some areas.
Okay, when it comes to gravel pits, as far as that area goes, it all depends on your soil structure and what the noxious weed is. So I will treat fields differently. When I go into an alfalfa field, I'll have them scrape back 6 inches. If I go into an existing gravel pit that has been being mined for 10 years, they will have to scrape back more. And then you're piling up and you're treating that specific pile, whether it be soil or another grade of gravel that needs to be pushed back. And with that being pushed aside, they're going to have to make room for it. I know sometimes the room is limited, but you have to take care of the weed issue before it moves on. I'm trying to think of anything else that would help with that. I've had people use helicopters to come in and treat the area, but we've had very good results with the scraping and treatment immediately. We like to get the plant material at a young stage. So there are tips in doing gravel pit inspections, but with what we have for minimum standards, that should meet it. And you are not going to get rid of, first year that you do certify a pit, you're going to be working on certification as far as reducing the seed bed. Spotted knapweed takes 7 years. And so you're working on moving things and treating it that way. So it's being very familiar with your soil structure, your gravel mining, and also your weed species that you're dealing with. And this is where NAISMA is a good resource. We've got a lot of people that understand the different weeds that are out there. And that's
fantastic. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Marcia. Great question. I'm going to move on to the next question. In Alaska, there have been requests for weed-free topsoil standards. Any thoughts? Yes, Janice. That has come up recently. That is a lot of other states have asked about that, and it's something we are pursuing, trying to figure out. We have a kind of a goal to put together a session at our conference in October on this topic to try to parse out, how to do this. So there have been requests and we're working on it. Question from Nancy Olmsted in Maine. Here in Maine, one of the top invasive plants that moves in gravel is Japanese knotweed, which spreads mostly by fragments. Is the NAISMA program intended to cover species which spread by fragments? Marcia, do you want to take that?
Yes, we have many other species, maybe not as aggressive as the knotweed, but we do have it where we cannot let the plant material keep going on, such as your leafy spurge, those type of plant material. So it's very important to have a good treatment program set up with your gravel pits. As an inspector, what you'll be looking at is knowing your plant material, and you may treat one gravel pit a little bit different than the other on the requirements for treatment. And so comparing leafy spurge to common tansy and different ones as far as the root structure moving and treating, it's really important to take care of the top area, and that's where scraping the top and treating those piles before anything can be removed from the property. And if you're dealing with like a Japanese knotweed, it might take that gravel pit a little bit longer in order to open up, because as far as the runners, needing to take care of that is important. So how do I, the mechanical part is important, but also the herbicide application, the chemical, the timing, everything is important there.
Excellent. Thanks, Marcia.
You're welcome.
All right. Ann Erickson asks, do the certified weed-free gravel inspectors need to be state or county employees, or is this up to state discretion? In Alaska, could somebody from private industry be certified as an inspector? Must the certifier be a legal entity that can enforce weed laws? So the first question is, I think, it is up to state discretion. I mean, but we do expect that it is a government employee as opposed to a private entity. We have had the question from producers or private companies, can, you know, I've had a consulting firm call and say, could we be, you know, certified to be inspectors? And our answer is basically, you know, no, we require that it's a government entity, and that entity is what determines who is allowed to be inspectors. So yeah, great question. It is a question we get periodically. And as you said, yeah, the certifier should be a legal, someone who is trained to uphold those weed laws. Marcia, do you want to add anything to that?
That explains it very well, Belle, because we do get a lot of questions on that, and it's very important that it is the legal entity working with the enforcement there, because there's legal issues when you go onto someone's piece of property and working with it and keeping the consistency there.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay, great questions. Yeah. One of our members up in Canada remarked regarding the Canadian province question that there are many Canadian members of NAISMA, but not of this program. So thanks for pointing that out, Jackie. Question from Allison Brown. If states are obtaining weed-free forage from other states, how can they be sure that weeds that are on the noxious weed list in their state but not on the state where they are retrieving the forage are not being transferred? That's a great question. You know, basically, we expect that if someone is in our program, they're at least, you know, they're upholding the minimum standards, the minimum noxious weed list, and that if they have noxious weeds that are different from other states, from the state that the product is being moved to, that they are being controlled. So that is a concern. But basically the short answer is, I think the program is designed to support as rigorous of inspection as possible. Marcia, do you want to add anything there?
Basically, we have our noxious weed, our prohibited weed list that's on the NAISMA one. And then each state or province can definitely add on theirs. And I think I'd say almost 100% of the members do that. They incorporate NAISMA into their noxious weed program. So if you're in a state and you're looking at other states that you might be getting from, and if it isn't on their noxious weed list, then that is something you need to address. That's as far as that goes. And that's a possibility. If you feel it's really important, is to bring it, and that is a possibility of adding that to our prohibited list, and that's a minimum of a year going through that and having the assessments done.
Mm-hmm. Right. Also, Mark Deluge here pointed out that weed-free forage is required to be weed seed-free as well. May not be 100%, but it is, we expect that the inspector does their best ability to inspect and evaluate to prevent seeds from moving as well. Okay, moving down here, Eleanor Soroki asks, with species that have deep reproductive rhizomes, such as knotweed, is scraping or chemical treatment still considered a best practice? And how does weed-free gravel assure the removal of all reproductive parts from such deep roots without closing the entire operation? Marcia, do you want to take that?
Oh, I love this knotweed. That's great. We haven't dealt with it. And yes, we have some aggressive, probably even the closest I can get to that would be your leafy spurge. And yes, they may not be able to open right away for that, but you have to assure that the vegetative part is taken care of as far as that goes, or you will have a nightmare in your area. And this is where, as a professional in dealing with your state and province, you have to figure out, we have the minimum NAISMA standards. We know what we need to meet there. But as an inspector for your specific state, you need to assure that the weeds chosen by your state, by your Minnesota Department of Agriculture or Department of Agriculture, should also be enforced too. So you're going to, whoever has knotweed in their state, you're going to address things a little bit different than those states or provinces that don't have that. And those states out west that deal with cheatgrass and a few other things, they're going to deal with things a little bit different than what we do in the Midwest. And so that's why we have the minimum standards to go off of. We have, I believe it's 60 prohibited weeds, or 58. And then every authority, entity that enforces their noxious weed law, you take that additional weeds on there. For example, we had discussion for gravel, minimum of 1 inspection per year. Visiting with a lot of people, I can't do less than 2, and I'll probably do 3 or 4. Those of you with knotweed, I'm thinking you're probably going to want to start first thing in the spring and assess it and see what you can do the scraping back. You're going to be learning some things when you're dealing with this. And that's what's nice about being part of NAISMA. We can share some of the skills that work well. So compared to someone in a state next to you that isn't dealing with knotweed, you're going to deal with your inspections a little bit different. That's where you are. That's why we want the authority in the specific state or province to do the inspections. You have been trained by your Department of Agriculture or department in the provinces, and you know what the expectations are there. So you're going to take our minimum standards and you're going to go above and beyond to meet the standards of your state or county. Hopefully that helps.
Mm-hmm. I think so. Thanks, Marcia. I'm going to try to get through a couple more questions here before we have to sign off. Here's a good question. Angela England asks, I work for an agency that does not have enforcement authority in a state that does not have an MOU. Is it possible for me to take the training in order to understand what I should be looking for to make recommendations to landowners? This question has come up, and I think what we have said in the past is that we want to limit the training to participating MOU states. But Marcia, correct me if I'm wrong, if we want to consider offering for folks like Angela to be able to see what she can be looking for.
Okay, you know what? I like that question. And I'm not going to give an answer right today. This is something I'm going to be bringing to our Weed-Free Forage and Gravel Committee, and that we have representations from all over the U.S. and Canada. And I think that's something that I will gladly add to the agenda. And we meet on the 28th of this month on a Tuesday. So if you're okay, or 29th, if you're okay with waiting on that, because I don't feel comfortable giving an answer on that right now. till
Sure. Yep, absolutely. Good question, though. Okay, Rory Ruffner asks, what liability does the inspector or agency have when inspecting weed-free gravel? What happens when weeds are found after gravel is moved from the pit? Marcia, I think this is a good one for you.
This is a good question. So Mark Deluge shared, and he's worked quite a long time with weed-free forage and gravel, and he brought up forage is weed seed-free. You will find on the weed-free gravel that we are not weed seed-free. That's why it's important to start a program. Example, I started a program in 2009. I knew within 7 years I would reduce the spotted knapweed. Well, it was less than that because there were seeds in the soil. And even though you're scraping and the amount of years dealt with that, you will see some down the road, but it will be getting less and less. The importance of the weed-free gravel program is to create good management practices in your gravel pits. The correct timing, because if you're working with the professional inspectors, they can let you know the timing, the right timing to do scraping, the right timing to do herbicide application, and that. We provide the minimum standards, but that's why you will see some weeds. There isn't any guarantee, and it has never come back in these years with me, and I've talked with other people from different states. No, you know you're reducing the seed bank, and you are creating a good area where you're not going to be having weeds down the road. So it's a preventative practice. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. Daniel Coleman asks, are you able to use buffers around a forage field? And if so, what is the size or distance from the certified field? I'm not sure. Yeah, what do you think, Marcia?
Did Julie sign in at all? Or Mark? You know, as far as the buffer areas, you're required there to do the surrounding area. That's what I'm familiar with. Could you get the name and phone number, or if we can put responses on later? I would like to either have Julie or Mark answer that one specifically with forage.
Absolutely. Yep, we can email. We can email afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Next question. Janice asks, I've recently retired where I was an inspector. Does this mean I can no longer continue as an inspector since I'm now a private citizen? I believe the answer is that's true. You cannot unless you are an employee of the agency that holds the MOU or the contracted agency. Is that correct, Marcia?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Okay. Ken Donnelly asks, are there requirements in transport to ensure that the vehicle containing the forage or gravel does not have invasive species in it or on it? Good question. Essentially, does it have to be transported in a clean truck? To my knowledge, I don't think we have those.
We don't. Yeah, we don't have them in our standards right now. And clean vehicle is just a practice. Now, that's not necessarily, that's with gravel, but when we're dealing with weed-free forage, that's going to be a little bit different. There is transit certificates that need to be clean, that need to be used if you're moving your forage, your hay, your straw, that type of thing. I think this would be a good thing to add to our webpage for some of the questions that are coming in today, that once we get them answered, we could put them on our webpage.
Absolutely.
And okay.
Yep. Okay, we're going to wrap up now, as we got just a couple minutes left. Susan Bird asks, how do I find out who in my state holds the MOU? I can email that to you afterwards, Susan. I don't have it right in front of me, but I do know that Washington is very active. So I will reach out to you and get you that contact person. And let's see. To clarify, Tony Smith asks, to clarify, can an employee of a different government agency, such as a soil and water conservation district, employ inspectors? if the MOU holding agency is a different entity, such as the State Division of Ag. I believe we would need, correct me if I'm wrong, Marcia, I think we would need an MOU with that government, that different government agency. Is that, unless the State Division of Ag has an agreement with, for example, the Soil and Water Conservation District to employ inspectors. Does that sound right, Marcia?
Yeah, if you know, each state is a little bit different, but if the inspector was placed in soil and water districts, that would work if they're meant to enforce the noxious weed law.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think we managed to get through all of our questions. If for some reason I missed a question, please email us and we'll get back to you. And as Marcia said, we can post some of the answers or all the answers to these questions. These are great. Maybe we'll put together like a frequently asked questions document that might be really helpful for you all and other potential partners in our program. So with that, I'm going to thank everyone again for being here today. A very special thank you to Marcia Watland, who was instrumental in putting this presentation together and is absolutely instrumental in running and coordinating our weed-free forage and gravel program. Special thanks also to our committee of very dedicated and thoughtful committee members who keep us on our toes and keep us up to date with latest techniques and technologies. So again, thank you all. Please visit our website for more information. Please join us as a member if you are not, and we hope to see you on a future webinar. Check out our webinar schedule. We are updating that for the remainder of the year, but all of our webinars will be the third Wednesday of the month at the same time, 2 Eastern, 1 Central. And with that, I think I'm going to sign off. Thank you again, and we hope to see you at a future webinar. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.